Imagine waking up tomorrow and every pharmacy in your country is empty. No insulin. No heart medication. No antibiotics. This isn't science fiction. It happened to several countries when India briefly restricted pharmaceutical exports in 2020. But here's what your government doesn't want you to know. Your country might be one of the 10 nations secretly dependent on India. And India, they don't even realize it. We're talking about countries that would face economic collapse, health crises, or complete infrastructure breakdown if India decided to pull the plug. You probably use Indian products every day without knowing it. Let me blow your mind. The United States, the world's most powerful nation, gets 40% of its generic medicines from India. Without Indian pharma, American healthcare would collapse overnight. Picture this: American hospitals with no generic drugs, patients rationing insulin, emergency rooms turning people away because they literally have nothing to give. In 2020, when India restricted exports, even Trump had to personally call Modi to beg for supplies. The most powerful man in the world. Begging. But that's not the worst part. Your iPhone, your laptop, your car's computer chip, they all depend on Indian software engineers working behind the scenes. Here's Silicon Valley's dirty secret. Without Indian IT workers, 70% of Fortune 500 companies would shut down within weeks. Every time you order on Amazon, book an Uber, or use Google, you're using Indian-built systems. Imagine Silicon Valley going dark. Error messages everywhere. The digital economy just stops. Microsoft, 36% of their workforce is Indian. Google, nearly half their engineers. Facebook's algorithm that decides what you see, built by Indians in Bangalore. When the H-1B visa program was threatened, tech CEOs flew to Washington in panic. They knew the truth. Without Indian talent, American tech dies. The UAE might look rich with all that oil money, but here's the shocking truth. 40% of their entire workforce is Indian. If Indians stopped working in the Gulf tomorrow, Dubai's skyline would go dark. Oil production would halt. Their economy would collapse in 72 hours. Picture those gleaming towers empty. Construction sites abandoned. Oil rigs unmanned. The land of luxury becomes a ghost town. But here's what's even crazier. Dubai's entire construction industry runs on Indian labor and Indian cement. Those massive skyscrapers? Indian hands built them with Indian materials. The Burj Khalifa? Indian steel. Dubai Mall? Indian marble. Even their luxury cars are assembled by Indians. Saudi Arabia is worse. 2.4 million Indians keep their oil flowing, their hospitals running, their tech sector alive. When COVID hit, they literally chartered special flights to bring Indian workers back because their economy was grinding to a halt. Qatar's World Cup stadiums? Built by Indians. Their roads, their airports, their entire infrastructure. Indian blueprints, Indian execution. But the Gulf states aren't the only ones hiding this dependency. Nepal gets 65% of its total imports from India. Every grain of rice, every drop of fuel, every medicine, controlled by India. When India blocked Nepal's borders in 2015, the country ran out of fuel in 2 weeks. Cars abandoned on highways. Hospitals without power. An entire nation held hostage by a supply chain they never knew existed. Nepal's earthquake relief? Indian supplies. Their electricity? Indian power grids. Their internet? Indian satellites. Nepal isn't just dependent, it's completely surrounded. And Nepal isn't even the most dependent. The Maldives, that luxury vacation paradise where you pay $1,000 a night, would literally starve without India. 70% of their food comes from Indian ports. Those Instagram-perfect resorts? They serve Indian vegetables, use Indian-made furniture, and rely on Indian doctors flown in monthly. When Maldives tried to get cozy with China, India simply delayed a few shipments. The government fell within months. Crystal blue waters, but empty plates and no medical care. Even their fresh water comes from Indian desalination plants. Their tourism websites run on Indian servers. Maldivian paradise is actually Indian dependency wrapped in coral reefs. Bangladesh's entire textile industry, worth $35 billion, depends on Indian cotton, dyes, and machinery. Every t-shirt you buy from H&M or Zara likely traveled through Indian supply chains. When India restricted cotton exports last year, Bangladesh factories shut down. Millions lost jobs overnight. Your cheap fast fashion? It's built on a dependency web most governments try to hide. But here's the kicker. Bangladesh also gets 70% of their electricity from India during peak hours. Their garment factories literally cannot run without Indian power. The fabric dyes that make your clothes colorful? Indian chemicals. The zippers, buttons, threads? Indian manufacturing. Remove India from the equation, and Bangladesh's economy collapses in 48 hours. Here's what will absolutely blow your mind. Kenya's entire digital payment system runs on Indian technology. M-Pesa, Africa's biggest mobile money platform, is powered by Indian software. No Indians equals no digital economy. Picture millions of Kenyans suddenly unable to pay for anything. Markets paralyzed. Economy frozen. One Indian company controls how an entire continent buys food. But Kenya's dependency runs deeper. Their largest hospital uses Indian-made medical equipment. Their roads are built with Indian machinery. Even their tea, Kenya's biggest export, is processed using Indian technology. Uganda's banking system? Indian software. Tanzania's mobile networks? Indian infrastructure. Rwanda's ambitious tech goals? Built on Indian partnerships. Remove Indian technical expertise from Africa, and the continent's digital revolution stops dead. Myanmar learned this lesson the hard way. 70% of their pharmaceutical imports come from India. When political tensions rose, India simply stopped shipments. Myanmar's healthcare system collapsed within weeks. Their border trade? 90% with India. Their currency reserves? Propped up by Indian investments. Myanmar tried to diversify to China, but discovered something shocking. Even Chinese products in Myanmar are assembled using Indian components. Singapore might surprise you. This rich city-state gets 60% of its IT services from India. Their banks, their government systems, their entire digital infrastructure, managed by Indians. When Singapore tried to reduce this dependency, they discovered it would cost them $50 billion and take 15 years. It was cheaper to just accept the reality. Their medical tourism industry? Indian doctors. Their construction projects? Indian engineering firms. Singapore's wealth is built on Indian expertise they can't replace. Here's a country that will shock you. Germany. The industrial powerhouse of Europe is secretly dependent on Indian pharmaceuticals and IT services. 45% of Germany's generic medicines come from India. Their automotive software? Developed in Bangalore. BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen. They all have massive R&D centers in India because German engineers are too expensive. When India threatened to restrict pharma exports during COVID, German health officials flew to Delhi in panic. Industrial Germany, brought to its knees by dependency they tried to hide. Even luxury brands like Adidas and Hugo Boss designed their products in Indian studios. German engineering, powered by Indian innovation. Canada has a dirty secret too. 30% of their tech workforce is Indian. Their healthcare system relies heavily on Indian doctors and nurses. Remove Indians from Canada's economy, and entire sectors collapse. Canadian mining companies? They use Indian software for everything from exploration to extraction. Their agricultural exports? Managed by Indian logistics companies. Canada's resource wealth flows through Indian systems. The most shocking revelation? Australia. This resource-rich nation depends on Indian mining engineers to extract their own wealth. 40% of Australia's mining operations are managed by Indians. Their healthcare system would collapse without Indian doctors. 25% of Australia's physicians are Indian trained. Their IT infrastructure? Built and maintained by Indians. When Australia restricted visas for Indians, their own mining companies lobbied the government to reverse the decision. They literally cannot dig their own resources without Indian expertise. Sri Lanka learned this the hard way. When their economic crisis hit, India was their only lifeline. Food, fuel, medicine, everything. But here's what most people don't know. Sri Lanka's crisis happened partly because they tried to reduce dependency on India. They borrowed from China instead, and when they couldn't pay back, their economy imploded. India stepped in with $4 billion in aid, but came with conditions: accept the dependency or face complete collapse. Sri Lanka had no choice. Their ports, their airports, their power plants, now all under Indian management. Sri Lanka tried to escape Indian dependency and ended up more dependent than ever. Here's the most shocking part. India often doesn't even realize how dependent these countries are until crisis hits. It's not intentional control. It's accidental dominance. Countries hanging by threads they didn't know existed. Indian companies don't wake up planning to control other economies. They just fill gaps, and those gaps become dependencies. By the time governments realize what happened, it's too late to change. The COVID pandemic exposed this reality. When India stopped exporting medicines to focus on domestic needs, 150 countries faced drug shortages. World leaders who had never spoken to Indian officials suddenly had the Indian Prime Minister's personal number. India holds the power to cripple or save economies, and most of the time, they're not even trying. But what happens when India starts using this power intentionally? China tried to pressure India during their border dispute. India simply stopped processing visas for Chinese business travelers. Chinese factories in India shut down within weeks. Billions in losses. Pakistan learned this repeatedly. Every time tensions rise, India restricts trade. Pakistan's economy immediately feels the squeeze. Their medicines become scarce, their businesses suffer, their currency weakens. India doesn't need military action. Economic dependency is a more powerful weapon. Here's what should terrify world leaders. India is just getting started. As Indian companies grow bigger and more sophisticated, these dependencies will deepen. More countries will find themselves unable to function without Indian products, services, and expertise. The next decade could see Indian companies controlling critical infrastructure in dozens of countries, not through conquest, but through pure economic integration. And most governments won't see it coming until it's too late. So here's the real question. Is your country next on this list? Check your medicine cabinet. Look at your phone. Think about your last online purchase. How much of your life depends on a country that doesn't even know it controls it? And if India ever decided to use this power intentionally, what then? The age of accidental empire has begun, and most of the world is already trapped inside it. Drop a comment below. What shocked you most? And which country do you think is secretly the most dependent on India?